Welcome back to another Alvado video. Now in today's video we're going to be watching a game played by k3soju, the undeniably best TFT streamer in the world, undisputed, unfathomable plays coming from this guy. It's just unheard of what he can do with this TFT board. Now before we get into this video, I'm going to have to ask that you do subscribe. I am very close to 1,000 subscribers and I like when the number goes up, so please subscribe. Now in the last video, I had some issues with my mic and I can guarantee that going to happen. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. It looks so stupid. Okay, let's get into the game. Okay, so he started Bow. And he has Wukong pair, and we can see the first augment of the game. Now he's looking at these augments. He said, man, you know, if I had a Bel'Veth right now, I'd probably pick scoped weapons, but he does not have a Bel'Veth, so he's not going to choose scoped weapons. He does not want Civilian Crest, and he does not want Axiom Arc. He rerolls that, and he gets offered 2 more unclickable augments. Combat training without any units to play around combat training with. I mean, even if you had units to play combat training with, you probably still shouldn't choose it. And then Ascension, which he doesn't really value in this meta. He thinks that fights are like too fast. They end too quickly for Ascension to, you know, give him the value that he wants. And he just goes ahead and goes Trade Sector. He also doesn't really like Trade Sector because this issue normally happens with Trade Sector where, you know, first of all, you're down a gold augment because it does not give you any combat strength. But of course, make up for losing out on the combat strength, you're getting, you know, more shops. There's a higher chance that your board will be stronger because you're upgrading a lot more of your units. But then there's another issue that arises, and it's that, you know, you're going to be rolling gold that, you know, helps you find units. I mean, you're not going to be rolling gold, but you're going to be rolling, so you get to see more units, which means that there's a higher chance that you'll have pairs and there's a higher chance that your board will be stronger. But the issue is that since you see more shops, you also see more pairs and you're more incentivized to hold these pairs. And sometimes that often will like bait you into holding on too many things, and then it'll grief your econ down the line. He's able to find a Kale 2, and he has this GP pair, and he wins this round, so he sells everything but that. Now, he did have an econ opener. He just had a bow and a chain, so let's see what he goes for here. You know, I think a lot of people would make like Sunfire in this spot, but he, I guess, just really values the money. Money in the early game is a lot more beneficial, so he actually just goes for 3-cost chain there. And he's going to go ahead and make Bramble on this Wukong 2. Now he rolls some gold. I mean, I don't know why I keep saying gold. He rolls because he has Trade Sector. And he's able to find 4 duelists. Now having 4 duelists plus a Wukong 2 means his board is like very strong. He's actually you know, in a pretty decent spot to try and push for a 5 streak. So even though he doesn't like Trade Sector because of the fact that you often will get griefed, if he can get this 5 streak, then that will very easily make up for, you know, the loss in econ from him having to hold on to all of these units. So I mean, from your experience, you might realize that he has like 22 gold and he has like a lot of pairs and his board is like pretty well upgraded. So you're thinking, man, that's like a lot of gold to have. How is he, you know, how is he losing econ? Well, first of all, it's because he had an econ opener. If you have an econ opener, then making a 30 gold is probably the norm on 2-6. If you don't have an econ opener, then making 20 gold is like the norm on 2-6. So the fact that he had, you know, 20 gold plus like a lot of upgrades means that he basically had like approximately 30 gold in that spot. He's able to make 40 here. He it's funny because he chooses to sell that Ash to hold this Kale, even though he already has a Kale 2. And you'll see later down the line, he actually chooses to end up re-rolling a lot of these units on his board, and actually makes a difference because it allows him to hold these extra Kales and go for a Kale 3. Now, because he sold the Wukong and he was in the spot to be able to fit in 6 duelists, he's going to go ahead and put that in. And you might have figured out that he's going to be playing duelists this game. Now, if you think that you understand how to play duelists because of its power in like previous metas, then I'm going to tell you that he plays this game very differently, and I chose this game this is a very specific game that I chose here to watch, because I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from this game, and he does like a lot of very interesting plays, so stay tuned. You can see the second hero augment of the game was, I think, Salvage Bin plus Jeweled Lotus plus something else that I forget, but it was something that he did not want. And he goes for Jeweled Lotus because not only does it allow, his main carry to get that crit, but the thing about duelists is that every unit is essentially a carry in this comp. Because what happens when you kill one duelist? Well, guess what? 5 duelists on your board are starting to like stack up attack speed. You kill the next duelist, half of your board now has, half stacks. You kill the next 2 units, well, the last 2 units alive are probably at max duelist stacks, and legitimately, no matter which one it is, they are going to be doing, a good amount of damage, especially in stage 3. It almost does not matter which one ends up being the last one alive, because they will have max attack speed, and they will, be putting in the work. Not max attack speed, but they'll have like max stacks. So Jeweled Lotus, even though it helps enable this Vayne carry, it also helps enable his entire team. And now I want to talk about, the overarching game plan for this game. I think a lot of people would look at this spot and they would be like, okay, if I'm 100 HP, I am going to use my HP lead as an econ lead, and I'm going to sack late stage 3, early stage 4, probably go 8 on 4-5, roll some gold, and then look to go level 9. We can see his spot here. He ended up putting this Bramble Vest on the Fiora because he had a Fiora 2 over this, he had a Fiora 2 and a Nyla 1, and Fiora 2 was stronger at the current point in time, so he chose to put the Bramble Vest on the Fiora. After some more trade sector rolls, he was able to he now has 6 Fioras and 6 Kales, and instead of making the decision to continue to, not like sack his board, but instead of choosing to just hold on to as much econ as possible and then push levels, he instead makes the decision that with Jeweled Lotus and Trade Sector, he thinks his spot is better to re-roll as many duelists as possible and try to cap his board around vertical duelists instead of pivoting off into something else later. It's pretty well understood by a lot of high-level players that 6 duelist is a very strong trait in stage 3, but it falls off very hard. And if you go into a stage 5 still playing 6 duelists, you are going to basically lose every single round. Duelist is one of those comps where you basically have to play, you have to pivot off. So he does like a pretty interesting play here. I'm going to rewind this really quickly. Since he has so many pairs, he actually chooses to not pick up any orbs because there's a chance that you can get units in the orbs. So he waits until the next round to pick all the orbs up after he has rolled some of his gold and he has, hit some of his units, so that he freed up some bench spaces. He's able to make Gunblade and Runans. He already had Gunblade, so he made Runans, and then he's now sitting on Bow, Rod, and Belt. And so we can see that he now has 8 Kales and 7 Fioras and 6 Vaynes. So of course he's starting to lose some rounds now because he is not choosing to, he's trying to go for 3 stars and he hasn't hit any of them yet. He hits Kale now. But, he's going to start being significantly stronger when he's able to get this Vayne 3 and this Fiora 3 online. Gets the Fiora. He's too far off of Yasuo. So he chooses to like half give up on it by going to level 7, and now he's going to look to try and re-roll Nyla and Vayne. He's also able to get the Zed carry or the Zed support hero augment because he only had duelists in. I'm pretty sure it was guaranteed in that spot, even though he didn't have his reroll. There's no other 4-cost duelist. I think it was 444 if I'm not mistaken. So there was literally no way that he could have gotten anything else. Maybe it was 344. Either way, this augment is really good for the comp, so he was going to go for that anyways. Now, why is this an acceptable game plan by Soju here? So instead of choosing to pivot off, he's going to, you know, he's looking to reroll all these duelists. Now the thing about duelists, why rerolling them is so strong, especially in combination with Jeweled Lotus, is that when you upgrade units, considering every single unit on his board is a carry, like I talked about earlier, because eventually, you know, some of the units that are left alive are going to have a really high attack speed by the end of the fight. Every single time you upgrade one of these duelists, your board becomes significantly stronger because every unit scales their AD on upgrade. You get more AD every single time you level up a unit. Now, this isn't Nyla's AD, I'm just going to use this as an example, but imagine Nyla has like 50 AD as 1 star. When you get Nyla to a 2 star, then she's going to have something like 75 AD, and then when you get Nyla to like a 3 star, she's going to have something like 115 AD. So even without, you know, itemizing any of these other duelist units, you know, they still do significant amounts of damage. You can see this Fiora has just a Bramble Vest, you know, with only tank items, and this Fiora does 2,000 damage. It does, you know, just above half as much as this 3 itemized Vayne does. And it's because of that fact that, you know, this Fiora 3 still has a lot of AD, and since the Fiora is has like a higher crit chance because of Jeweled Lotus, then, you know, she's just dealing a lot more damage. And even this Kale 3, even though Kale is kind of like a trash unit, this Kale is definitely, you know, providing a lot of support for his team. It's like he's like legitimately building a team full of carries. He still has this Zed in the orb because he hasn't found a Zed pair. He's still 3 off of Vayne. He hasn't rolled that much though. After he leveled to 7, he just kind of sat for a while, and he still is pretty healthy, so he's going to go ahead and roll above 50 until he deems his spot necessary to roll down. So here's another very interesting play. Because he has Trade Sector, you know, he's open to finding a lot more units. And you can kind of see how his items ended up being here. He has this 3-item Vayne with Runan's Giant Slayer and Gunblade. He really wanted Last Whisper, but he wasn't able to get a glove, so there's no way of making Last Whisper with the bow that he had, so he ended up just using the bow for Giant Slayer. And the best item combination that he could make with his final items ended up being Warmogs and Rabadons. And the issue with Rabadons in a vertical duelist comp is that not very many of them scale very well with AP. He considered putting it on this Fiora because Fiora's AP scaling actually increases her healing, which, you know, would be kind of good, but I don't think the AP scaling is like that worth it, and he wants to leave that slot open to hopefully get a 3rd tank item anyways. What he ends up doing here is he actually just holds onto these Viegos because he found them in like a previous shop. And since he has Fiora 3, he says he puts the Rabadons on this Urgot that he has to increase the chance of him finding gold. But then he chose to hold on these Viegos so that once he finds a Viego 2, he actually can, you know, make some use out of this Rabadons. And he can also, you know, buff this 3-star Fiora by giving it the Oxforce trait. So he's playing this this very weird variation of duelists where he kind of just chooses to reroll a lot of things. That's not that weird. I've seen a lot of people reroll duelists. This really is the only way that you can still commit to playing duelists later on in the game, is that you really need to have like 3-star duelists. I think a lot of people aim to get either Fiora or Yasuo 3, and then Nyla and Vayne 3. And if you can get that, then it is very feasible to commit to still playing Vertical Duelist in the late game, even if you don't have 8. Now that being said, if you try to play a comp like this from like a low roll spot, it is not going to look very good. You can still see how much health he's bled out. He's only able to be in this spot because of his win streak in the beginning of the game. But, you know, him making the decision to go this variation where he's able to like tempo into this strong board is a pretty, you know, smart one. And the fact that he was able to make use of this Rabadons by holding on this Viego, I think is something that you don't see a lot of players do. You can see here he solidifies his no, he actually doesn't solidify his top 4 yet, but he's top 5. He's, you know, he's the healthiest in the lobby, so he basically is like guaranteed top 4 from this spot, especially since his entire board is upgraded. Doesn't have a single 1-cost unit anymore. You know, the difference, you know, like I said, every single upgrade in this duelist comp matters. So if you can get to that spot where you actually have like a lot of upgrades, it's like a really big deal. It takes a really long time to figure out what his item is, and then what ends up happening is he ends up just like scouting other people, and he runs out of time while he's scouting, so it automatically just picks an item for him, and then yeah, it appears right there, and it just gives him a death blade. He chooses to put on the Kale here because since Deathblade is now percentage of your base AD, Kale's AD I think is higher than Zed's. And also, Zed has no items. It's not the carry Zed hero augment, it's the sport Zed hero augment. You don't need to itemize Zed in this spot. He's basically just like a random frontline unit here. He's just like the strongest duelist that you can play that doesn't, or like, that isn't meant to provide any support. So he just chooses to put the Deathblade on Kale because he thinks it's going to be more beneficial. You know, Kale's in the back line, it's safer. Zed is like in the fray. He's not going to be able to actually do that much. Yeah, see, now he's able to solidify his top 3 here. It's now a top 3 situation, and even after getting his Vayne Zephyred, he's still able to win this fight. Now, there's some pretty like funny things that end up happening in these last couple fights here. So you can see he's scouting his board now. Soju plays this like weird game with this guy where basically the whole the way that he loses this fight is if he just guesses the wrong side on where his opponent is going to place his Zed. And so Soju tries to guess that he's going to swap, but then he doesn't swap, and then he gets his Vayne killed. And in the next round, he does this mind game where he knows that he's going, like, he knows that Soju is prone to swapping. So he's probably going to predict that Soju is going to swap at the last second. So then Soju actually chooses to not swap, and he actually guesses correctly. And then the Zed is not going to be on the Vayne anymore. But the thing is that this guy has 2 Urgot 2s. He has way too many items. He has like no way of actually beating him. Now I will say that if you are in that spot, and you know, if the fight is closer, right, that like Soju would have lost that fight no matter what. He basically had like the best position he could have asked for and still ended up losing. But if your entire team hinges on like one backline carry and you're afraid of getting jumped on, he had a Fiddlesticks and he had another backline unit in the Kale. I think a good play that you can do there is just use your Fiddlesticks as corner bait, and then use your Kale as the other corner bait, and then you could just middle your Vayne, because most people that are choosing to pick a Zed positioning is they're not going to go middle unless you have like shown that you go middle if you've gone middle before. But yeah, I thought that game was pretty interesting. It's like a weird build. I think him including that Viego on his team was like something that I don't think like anybody would actually consider, because he ended up getting that Rabadons. His team comp worked out pretty well. Was able to get him a 2nd place. And yeah, I mean, that's just Soju showing you how to turn a 100 streak into, you know, a spot where instead of tempoing into a fast 9, you can use the extra time that you have with your HP to just make like a really capped board. Hopefully you learned something in this video. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.